Hey guys, Jarretman here, back with some more 500 Zoom. If you watched the last video, I'm picking up right where I left off in the last video. I'm hoping that this video we get into some more hands. Last video was a lot of folding pre-flop. On a 7, we'll call here with the 9-8 suited. I definitely think so. I definitely think my range wants to have some raises, and this is a very reasonable hand to go into the raising range some of the time. However, on 30, I'm gonna call. I think it's really close on 30. Like, the actual real frequency might be like 70% raise, 30% call. And as far as hands go that want to bluff this river, I think our ace highs do have showdown value here, so we don't bluff the ace highs. We don't bluff king queen because that again has showdown value. And on an 8, which is the lowest frequency, I'm just thinking about whether we give up some 9 highs here. And I actually think we do. I actually think we do just totally give up some. Yeah, they have bad blockers, and I don't think our range can support us betting all of our absolutely no showdown value hands. So yeah, I don't think we get to bet this pure. I've been wrong on these spots lots of times before. Usually it's safer to go with the betting option more so than the checking option, but I'm pretty sure we can't bet all of our ace highs there. Or sorry, all of our 9 highs, like non-showdown value hands. Table 1's a board. I'm likely going to split the turn. You could do a one-size strategy as well. I'm likely going to do an overbet and a small bet. The small bet will be built around hands like 6s through 10s, some weaker jacks, and the overbet will be built around mainly 4x and some stronger jacks. And our hand, I guess, just wants to go into the check fold mostly. Can definitely bet the turn. I don't think that our 3 of hearts blocker is relevant to the 4x range because he doesn't have 3-4 suited, and he doesn't have queen 4 suited. However, the 3 doesn't really block his folds when we bet. So that's kind of nice. Definitely not a spot that happens too often. I think this board, despite it having a 4 and a 5, can still be bet pretty often from in position, even if he's using a large size. Table 1, we're going to start with a check. Under the gun versus button. Button still has jacks, 10s, 7s. Actually, I think even at a higher concentration than under the gun does, even though under the gun opens it pure. What I mean by that is that the button's calling range is so tight in this spot that he might even have a higher percentage of his range being sets than under the gun does, even though under the gun has more raw combos. I'm not 100% sure about that though. I am going to build a small check back range here on table 2. I'm not just going to range bet it. When there's the 5 pair specifically, I'm not going to range bet it. Our hand is a decent check back. It also can bet, of course. The lower ace highs like ace 4, ace 2, ace 3 want to bet more than ace 6. But we rolled a 1, so we check it back. And I think this hand just goes to showdown now. I'm going to fold in a 47 here in this spot with my ace jack. And we're going to check it back. River at king, I still don't think we bluff any ace highs. This is the reverse spot where his range can't support just betting all of his air hands. He has to check with a bunch of just 0 showdown value hands because of how wide and weak his range is. So we just check down ace high and mostly win or chop, I'm gonna say. Yeah. There's two recreationals in the blind, so I'll open the 6-7 suited here. This is about as far as I'll deviate pre-flop in that I will open some mixed hands, pure. But for example, I'm not going to open like 6-8 suited in this position just because the blinds are recreationals. And we'll call versus this small 3-bet. Try to flop something. This isn't really the best board to ever try to apply a lot of pressure to recreationals who, while their range might not be suited ace-x heavy, I don't think you get many folds from their like kings, queens, jacks region. So I'm not going to consider floating there, and I'm not going to consider doing anything crazy. So our very, very worst flush draws do go into the check some of the time, but I think on 61 I am going to bet. And I think I'm going to play over better check here. It is mainly built around a straight. We don't bet very often. Flush draws will be our highest frequency, quote unquote, bluffing hands on the turn. The way that you make sure that you have flushes into your river range after you check the turn is that you will check some jack x of spades and 9x of spades. And maybe like some queen 10 of spade traps. And then your other flush draws just mainly go into the betting range, except for your absolute worst ones. So this one here, it just can't, like, just always bet, I guess. We don't have enough queen 10 and ace jack and ace 9, pocket 9s, pocket jacks. We don't have enough of those hands to justify just always betting with all of our flush draws, but it's close. We're going to call here versus the only 8 big blind 3-bet. I think I would float here with the queen 9 of hearts, but the queen 9 of spades, just we have nothing going on. Approaching the bottom of our 3-bet range here, small blind versus under the gun. King queen off will mix between 3-betting and calling. So we get the snap check back. It's a pretty good spot to have a lot of bets here on the turn. I don't think this hand class is one of the classes that wants to bet the turn, though. I think we can still check call versus a 1/3 reopen. And while we mostly lose to ace highs, in theory, I think this does have some showdown value. And maybe just always betting 1/3 in this river outperforms having any sort of checking range, but I'm not going to think like that. Bit of a loose open on the button there, but likely fine. I think I will play a very small raising range here on table 1. built mainly around pocket fours and then some combo draws and some random bluffs. I think ace queen of diamonds just wants to call. And I think we will have a high frequency check back with specifically ace queen of diamonds. The lower ace x suiteds, I think, want to bet the turn more often, just because we block a lot of his continuing range when we have the queen of diamonds. But if we have, for example, ace three of diamonds, he can have pocket queens with the queen of diamonds. He can have ace queen with the queen of diamonds. So I think that puts us on the turn with this exact combo into mostly checking. And then on the river, if we do have some ace highs that want to go into our small betting range, so I would still want jams because I will have some flushes that check back. But again, with the queen of diamonds, I think I'm incentivized to go into the normal betting range. Lost a little bit of value there, but that's the way it goes. His hand is a very clear check call. King 9 suited is really close versus this small 4-bet sizing, actually. Yeah, I think we'll peel versus that small 4-bet size with these loose 4-betting positions. Not the greatest board for the cutoff, but he still has queens, kings, aces pure. We trap some aces sometimes, but we don't have queens and kings. He also 4-bets ace jack off, king jack suited. Versus the small 3-bet size, we will call the ace jack off here. And we have an easy fold now on table 2. Pre-flop's already really close. I think I would fold it sometimes, call it sometimes versus that size. Not playing many raises on table 1, but we will have some raises, built mainly around pocket 6s. Our hand is ahead of a decent portion of his range still, and that portion will check back the turn at some frequency, like ace highs. We're in a tough spot versus a bet. I think it mostly folds though. Okay, so now we're in an interesting spot. I do think we are going to pure bluff this combo. I don't think there's enough ace high showdown value, especially because he just rivered some like ace fives. So I'm just thinking of my size. I think we're too deep to jam. I think if we want to have a main size, we want to have this size with even some sets. I think I'm going to play block and overbet here. Not worry too much about having the jamming range with the nut flush rather, or the nut flush rather. And I think this exact hand wants to mostly go into the overbet range if I bet. Big blind versus under the gun, a large bet makes some sense on this board, I would say. Because big blind versus under the gun can't just bet range on this board. We have 10s, we have 9s, we have king 10 suited, we have king 9 suited. Versus min raise, we even have the off variations. We have queen jack off, queen jack suited, some frequency that didn't 3-bet. So given that under the gun can't necessarily bet his range regardless of what he does, using a larger size does make some sense. And he does have an advantage on this board in stronger king X. And he's more condensed around this board than we are. We have tons of garbage hands still. I think I'm still going to high frequency 1/3 this flop. But it makes sense that I see a check back is what I'm trying to say. It's not outrageous. So usually having the ace on the river here is good because they're supposed to check back a lot of ace highs and not bluff with them. This is not one of those spots. I think if he does get to the river with a hand like ace five of clubs that didn't bet the flop, he does get to bluff it. However, I think in the check line, this hand is just goes into the check call, I think. I don't know, actually. I rolled a 20. We'll fold. That one's close. I'm going to check that one later. Versus a reg, I'd be tempted to use this combo to bluff. I just saw Mr. Being a Bad Beat in the pool. Somewhere. I think I can get him to fold a 10 here with this size. And we'll call on table 2. Versus a large bet on this board, I think we will actually fold. And versus the small bet, we will always continue. When we see this bet, it's likely he's betting 1/4 with range. So we just keep that in mind. Not playing many raises on this board. Again, if you want to have a small raising range built around sixes, you just have to be aware of which hands need to go into the raising range to accompany that. This might seem crazy, and maybe I'm insanely out of line, but I think with the ace-queen double on blocker jamming here on the turn is very reasonable. I mean, I don't block either of the flush draws you could be betting with, and I'm ahead of a lot of those hands, so we want to jam some of these hands to accompany our like king-queen, and yeah, we're actually ahead. So this is why the double unblocker jam with ace-queen performs pretty well. So like we dominate some of the hands like that have to call us off. Although I don't even know if that hand has to call us off, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know about that one. So table 1, this is a very good board, I would say, for the big blind still. Even though the small blind has a lot of interaction on this board with some of his range, the big blind just does better with his polar imposition range on this board, I would say. And as a result, I think we get to bet very frequently. Even with a hand like I had, which looks like a pretty clear check back. Yeah, he's using the very large 4-bet sizing, which is interesting. It's not bad, of course. You could argue this is even technically a slightly higher EV size than using a smaller one. And I do think we still want to have a flatting range versus even the large size. If you go too large as a 4-bet, though, then you have the problem that your opponent can just play 5-better jam. And I'm pretty sure on this board, we definitely want to start donking. Because he went so big pre-flop, my calling range is condensed just around pairs. It doesn't matter that I don't flop these sets. This isn't a bet saying that I think we want the 10 of diamonds here now. And I think this one folds, yeah. Yeah, we roll a 32. I think we want the 10 of diamonds more than we don't. Yeah, okay. We'll fold the 10s there. Yeah, you don't have to lead here, of course. It's just that if someone goes super huge as a 4-bet preflop, then your calling range gets so tight and condensed, where his range still has that bluff portion in there. Where I had to fold basically, like even a hand like ace jack suited had to fold versus that large 4-bet size, right, in these positions. So basically the worst hand I have here is just some sort of pair, and there's no king and no ace on the board. So he has ace king, he has, you know, ace queen off, he has those king 10 suiteds, king jack suiteds. Low frequency call here with the 9-7 off. Blind versus blind. The rake really erodes the value of the call here. And then versus the jam, it's actually a really close spot with 10s, but I'm pretty sure 10s without the diamond there fold some of the time. Just check fold table 1, I think. I'm not too concerned about balancing on my range in this spot. It's already kind of a non-spot. I don't see much reason in having a check back range on this board, even hijack versus big blind. Let me go back to that hand with Zelek, the 4-bet pot. Yeah, if he went to a smaller 4-bet size pre-flop, my range still contains a lot of those suited broadways, some of the lower pairs, some hands that aren't just like strong middling pairs, right? Versus that strategy, I'm not going to lead that flop ever. Interesting size on the 5-5-7 rainbow. It's likely good, actually. In terms of my ace-king combo, we block ace-5 suited, which is good, but we block the ace of clubs. Okay, so I was going to say if he bets the turn, some of his bluffs will contain the ace of clubs. We're a bit deeper to start the hand as well. We started the hand a bit deeper, rather. And I think on the turn, our hand is going to mix between betting and checking. I think being deeper, that mix will go slightly more towards checking than it will towards betting. As deeper, he has to check more stronger hands on the turn. That makes sense. It's not like he can't have a 6, but he can still value bet queens for this size as well. And on a 3, I'm just going to fold. I think heroing this hand is, I guess, reasonable at some frequency. Because our check back range on the turn, because we check back on the turn, rather, we're a little bit capped, and that's fine. We just have to be aware of that on the river. Have to fold on table 2. I'll call the 2 recreationals. Again, the value of your calls really gets erased by the rake here. I'm tempted to raise the flop, but because I have no information on the cutoff, and he is betting into 2 players despite it being a 1-4 size, and my hand has decently high equity versus even an overpair, on the flop at least. Now I just really don't believe his size, to be honest. And I'm going to do something a little bit spewy, try to get him to fold a hand like 9s through jacks. Even if I do get him to fold a hand like ace-king, it's not horrible either. This is really close in table 1. I honestly don't know what to do. I wouldn't be surprised if I have to float some king highs. Even versus the large bet, I mean, on the turn. But I'm going to fold, I guess. So when he folds here in this like 6-5 offsuit hand, we obviously had the best hand. Unless he folded 9s, 10s, jacks, which I do think is possible. But that result is not a bad thing. We roll a 2 here. We have what looks like a relatively tough table. I'm just going to fold the 5s under the gun. So you can, or at least I will be, I'll be 4-bet jamming or calling with the 10s. He goes for the larger 4-bet size, which makes me want to jam more. However, I roll a 24, and this player is unknown, at least to me, so I'm going to go for the call. I think we might have to float versus 1/4 here with 10s, just because he's going to be betting range. And 10s is ahead of a lot of the hands that he can be betting range with on this board, because it's ahead of his pre-flop range. I'm timing out with 3s there. I was just thinking if I have to use it as a bluff on the turn. I think we do a lot of checking on this turn, despite it being Broadway. Okay, so now a lot of the hands that I was ahead of, like ace queen off, I am now behind. I think we have an easy fold versus any sort of bet here with 10s. We're even blocking the remaining bluffs that he does have, like ace 10 off. I'm just wondering if I ever have to turn 10s into a bluff, and I think the answer is no. He can have a hand like ace 4 suited. He can have a hand like 9s and 8s. And if I do want to turn it into a bluff ever, I think it has to be on a run out where the river is like a jack. Like here in this spot, for example, I don't want to turn 10s into a bluff. I don't think I need to. I will have other hands to bluff here. I do think he has a queen almost always, or a hand like jacks, but he could have 9s, he could have 10s, he could have ace 4. He could have some give ups. Or top set. Which is very reasonable, by the way. This line is extremely reasonable with top set. Aside from the very large 4-bet size pre-flop, I would have played it the exact same way. Nine seven suited is close, actually. I think it's going to be the bottom of my cutoff opening range. Checking off, we will actually call sometimes versus the under the gun min raise. Not versus the 3-bet though. So table 1 is a spot where in these videos in the past I've been playing 1/3 or check, which I still think is a good strategy, by the way. But I'm just going to play big better check, I think. I don't think the EV gain of big better check is that huge that if you don't do it, you are going to be losing EV. It's actually very similar to 1/3 or check. I think half pot or check is also very similar. Overbet is also a reasonable strategy. If you bet like 110 here, I think that's a very reasonable strategy. The reason why it makes sense to use a larger bet in check is because that allows you to leverage your preflop advantage better, which is your jacks plus, which of course beats his 10x. The 1/3 strategy instead leverages the fact that you open a tight range and the big blind had to call with a bunch of profitable calls preflop. And those hands now miss the flop, and you're targeting that portion of his range. Of course, this this would be a board where you would gain the most EV by having 2 sizes. But I'm just playing 1 size per flop. We don't fold many suited hands, big blind versus small blind open, but with this rake structure, we do fold some. This is one of them. Okay, it's my turn to have king, small blind versus big blind here, versus Clem 90. Not as high, not as high EV of a spot as he had. Same thing we just talked about for this 10-6-4 rainbow can apply here, even small blind versus big blind. However, small blind versus big blind on most boards, I'm just playing 1/3 or check. It's a lot different being out of position with these super wide ranges here than it is being in position with a tight under the gun range. Okay, so we have an interesting turn decision here. Very interesting turn decision. I think I'm leaning towards... So I think I'm going to play normal bet or check on the turn. And I'm leaning towards this hand wants to bet more often than it wants to check. I think you have 2 choices here on the turn for what strategy you want to play after you 1/3 the turn. And I think that 1/3 normal bet or check, if you want to split, is a very reasonable strategy. I don't think there's much overbetting happening on this turn here. The most reasonable one size strategy might be half pot or check. Seems good to me. Just going to do a lot of betting, if not my range versus a weaker player here on this board, or at least an unknown player who is short stacked. In table 2, now that the board pairs, we no longer play against any of his worst 10x, as in we chop versus them. So I'm going to check. I don't know how accurate that is. Maybe we should still be blocking a lot of our 10x. I think we actually... I was going to say, like, I don't think this exact hand wants to bet very often on the turn because we have the 9 of clubs, which blocks some hands that could call the flop and then fold the turn. But versus the weaker player, I don't mind just putting in a lot of bets there. Probably give up the river, though, having the ace of spades just blocking a lot of his folding range by the river. The turn, it's a nice bet with the ace of spades. The river, it's not so nice. So I expect to see at least a half pot bet here, if not a slightly larger bet. And versus half pot or 66, I don't think we fold much ace queen. He does go for the 1/3. Okay. That could mean a couple things. That could mean he's playing 1/3 or check. It could mean he's splitting, actually. Given that he's a high stakes reg, I imagine he might be splitting. Regardless, I think we just want to call with our hand. And yeah, the turn is a little bit dicey. So is the flop here versus half pot. I think we have enough just random queen X of clubs to call that we actually do fold some queen X, no flush draw, no backdoors. So like queen 9 off with the 9 of hearts would call, for example, but we fold sometimes with that combo. This is really close here. I think with the queen of spades, I'm going to fold. The hands that are going to bet the turn the most, from his perspective, are spades. So a hand that has The queen of spades will likely bet the turn. And I rolled not very high, so I'm going to make the fold there. It's definitely close, though. I definitely think we have to peel ace-queen. In these positions, I will use different suited aces as part of my 4-bet range, and ace-5 suited will just go into the calling range. You could mix it in there, though. It's not crazy. The size is pretty reasonable, I'd say. Leveraging its 10s plus advantage. We have nothing to do but call. We will place some raises on this board when he bets that big, just built around some hands that want some protection. Don't think we can fold the turn yet versus that size, even on 15. We're going to be in some really horrible river spots. I don't think this is indifferent on the turn. I think this is mainly a call with exactly ace-5. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe versus half pot we do start folding. River's super close now. Nice hands, Alec. Okay. Sorry, it was too much to think about and say it out loud while I was in the hand. What I was thinking about mainly is hands that contain the ace of diamonds. How often do they find themselves bluffing this river? And I came to the conclusion that hands that have the ace of diamonds don't often find themselves bluffing this river. In fact, I think hands that have the ace of diamonds are more likely to be value betting this river than they are to be bluffing this river. He's also never bluffing a hand that has a 5 because he doesn't have many. So basically my hand doesn't block any bluffs. And it's double draw, so we have tons of draws that just bricked. So we do have to make some uncomfortable call downs that are hands that are not just a jack or a 9. I don't know if any of that's true necessarily, but that's what I was thinking at the time. Also, I don't like his turn size. This should be fun. 200 big blinds deep. Just going to size up a bit when I'm 3-betting this position, 200 big blinds deep in general. Table 1, we will mix between call and 4-bet here. On 45, we will call. I could be convinced that a strategy aside from just betting 1/3 with your range is better here on table 2. I believe you. I think that betting 1/3 with your range still is going to perform pretty well in this texture, despite it being flush draw, despite us being 180 big blinds deep. Table 1, I have no idea actually what I should do with my hand. I think on 85 I'm gonna raise. I don't know if this hand class ever wants to raise. If I'm really unsure, I usually just go for low frequency. But my hand can get it in on the flop, which is kind of nice. In table 2, we will go for either a check call or a check fold, depending on what size he chooses. And I think dominating his flush draws and having at least one overcard and at least having the 5 as an out when he does have aces or ace king is good enough to just get it in because we're out of position. And yeah, we dominate when he has a hand like that. Okay. 8-6 suited is a fine 3-bet that deep with those positions. It's just low frequency. I think the hand is fine up until the point when he 3-bets the flop. I don't think he ever wants to 3-bet the flop with that hand. We roll a 19. He went for the larger bet. We will fold. Not always folding here with 10s though. Even though there's 2 overs, just the fact that we bet range on the flop and the fact that on a brick turn, really none of our hands improved. We have to build out a sizable checking range. And then we have to defend that range. Sometimes a little uncomfortably. That worked out really well for me, this ace-5 suited hand. That doesn't necessarily mean that my raise on the flop was good. I mean, it can't be horrible. It's just I'm not sure if I'm thinking about the spot wrong. Yeah, I think that's going to be it for this video. There's a chance I don't upload the video before this that I recorded just because it was a lot of folding pre-flop. I think I played like only 5 hands in 30 minutes or something, so there's a chance you only see this video, so just ignore the part at the beginning where I said I'm picking up from the last video. Mainly because I'm too lazy to edit these videos. But yeah, that is going to be it for this video. We'll play this ace-king hand if it sees a flop. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Take care.